Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your lunch today to join Torsion in what is one of the first in a series of educational webinars that we'll be running throughout the course of this year. The topic for today is very much a kind of quick Q&A session with my two panelists and colleagues here, who I'll introduce shortly. But if I can just move into what we're looking to cover in today's session. So we're very much talking around the paradigm of shifting file sharing and permissions away from historically looking at an IT controlled issue and actually back to that business user. And why is that? Well, who needs access to what? Is really just a big, complex, moving target within organisations, and IT teams, have got to do more with less, and they can't keep up anymore with the manual processes and the various tools that they've got to manage, day in and day out. And really, the modern workplace is just an amazing collaboration place, sphere for people internally and externally. So in the essence of 2023 and data security, we need to take a look at a kind of culture for sharing, collaborating with data, and why understandably IT teams can no longer keep up, or actually don't wish to manually control those file sharing pieces. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce you to Paul Bedford. Paul Bedford is a leading cybersecurity consultant who's worked across many organizations such as Shell and Burberry, to name but two, in various guises as a compliance officer, cybersecurity practitioner. So Paul is a leading light in this space, and we really look forward to hearing some of your thoughts around this area, Paul. Alongside that, we have our resident Torsion subject matter expert in Paul Graham. Paul is very much an advocate of the modern workplace and working in with Microsoft 365. So the two Pauls, as we'll say, are going to have a little conversation around a number of questions and ideas that our clients have posed to us over the last 12 to 18 months around data security, their posture, but equally why should users have the ability to be able to share files. We welcome any questions that you may have in the Q&A chat panel during this webinar, and we'll be more than happy to hopefully build those into any of the conversation points that we go through. At the end of it, we'll just do a little wrap up, and obviously from there, we're happy to move on to whatever questions you may have thereafter the presentation. So, without further ado, let's launch into the very first question that's been posed to us. Why is it important to know who has access to what? Paul Bedford, do you want to give us your views on that?
I can kick off on that, no problem at all. I think. What's obviously security comes into everything, doesn't it? If you've got sensitive information or really confidential information, like board strategy documents or contractor day rates and things like that, it can be rather uncomfortable if the wrong people have got access to them. And also, you can't guarantee confidentiality and the integrity of the information for a security point of view if you don't know who has access to it. And also, Paul, there's loads of different compliance regulations that people have got to stick to, and they're like GDPR or is it HIPAA? Is it HIPAA? HIPAA, the healthcare yes. one, yes. And PCI DSS as well. One of the key points of these compliance frameworks is that you've got to know who has access to sensitive information. Otherwise, you're going to be in serious problems. I mean, can you imagine if you were audited and you had mental health information that was in the wrong hands, and you didn't know who had copies of that mental health information? Could get really uncomfortable.
It's proving it, Paul, though, isn't it? It's like it's okay saying, and this is the thing I think with like many of the tools that we have. If somebody says, okay, then yes. Paul Bedford, I know we're called Paul. Somebody says, hey Paul, prove that on that particular site or that information there, who has got access to that. It's really hard for you then to prove that compliance. And especially if you're the person who's in charge of that information, often it requires a request to central IT, so it is very, very tricky.
Yeah, and also you got to watch. If you don't know who's got access to data, you can't control when it leaves your corporation. I mean, obviously sometimes people accidentally share data to people they shouldn't do. Sometimes people maliciously share data with people they're not supposed to. But there's also the cheeky people, isn't there? And I mentioned this to you previously. So the cheeky people are, for example, let's pretend you've got a contractor in, and they've developed some really quite great stuff over the years that they've been in the company, and it's quite confidential or even highly confidential or sensitive, and they think they might be able to use that again at the next company that they're at, and they could easily email it themselves. And if you don't have any visibility of who's got access to that information, it's really hard to discourage that or to stop it, isn't it?
It is. And you and I suppose most of the audience who are watching now, they'll probably be aware of things like DLP, within Microsoft 3 data loss prevention. Shouldn't do too many acronyms.
No.
But really, for me, as somebody who spends a lot of time talking about technology to people and trying to make this more of a human kind of tool, instead of something that's been really abstract. We're talking about information loss prevention here, because data by itself is fairly meaningless, but it's
useless.
It is, but it's the key information elements to that which is so important. And by the way, if anybody who is watching, feel free to disagree in the chat, or just whatever you're feeling, just to say what you feel,
controversial,
please.
come on.
Yeah, just say. And there's some good controversial points coming up, I do promise. And just you were just saying before, kind of tying into all that kind of stuff, it's auditing, isn't it? Knowing who has access to what, right? Lets you identify and investigate those security issues. If you've got somebody who's been a bit cheeky, and they want to kind of reuse that work, well, how are you going to see that? How are you going to how can you go back in time? How can you have that eye in the sky and see who did what and when? So that's all. And again, this all ties into internal policies, and then also proving that regulatory requirements like HIPAA, like GDPR, like PCI DSS, all that kind of stuff, So PCI DSS, that's the credit card one, right?
Yeah,
Paul?
credit card stuff. It is, absolutely. Yeah, you don't want a whole list of credit card information anywhere on your network that someone could get to and use. That's really bad. They don't like that at all.
No, it's bad. And then of course improved user management as well. So knowing who's got access to what, and not just who's got access to it, but why have they got access to it?
Yes.
Really, really important. So we're only giving the information to those who need it. Super duper important. And I think that now brings us on nicely to the next topic, Steve.
No, absolutely. So based in bearing in mind what you've both kind of just commented around there. So we're gonna give we're gonna allow our users to collaborate both internally and externally. But surely that access and those permissions are just really going to spiral out of control very, very quickly within Microsoft 365, because we've got all these wonderful kind of share buttons everywhere.
Yeah, we definitely have.
Well, Paul, before we go any further, just a quick question. For me is, have you ever known a SharePoint site or any kind of thing within Microsoft 365 to keep its permissions longer than a few weeks? It's really hard, just because of what Steve was saying about those share buttons, because everything could be shared again and again and again.
It can, and it's ridiculous, isn't it? And so let me kick off with this one then, because it's like spaghetti sometimes. I mean, you've obviously got the coming of users and the removal of users from your business, and that's fair enough.
Starters, leavers,
yeah, that's right. But and when you've got that, again, there's kind of a bit of a security gap. If your processes aren't up to it and you don't remove their permissions quickly, then there's obviously an opportunity for of risk there as well for security. And one of the things I found a lot, Paul, and you've probably found this yourself, is that I've changed roles a lot, and I still inherited the previous roles permissions for all the files that I've been given permission for in my previous role, loads of them. And
they get left on though, don't they?
They do.
That's the thing. Yeah,
I've actually come back to companies and still had the same access rights as I did when I was there the last time, which is really bad, isn't it? So, but how do you control that? Because it's so complex. You've got like, you know, I could share a folder with someone, and then they can then just share it with someone else, and that with a third party even, and they can then share it. And before you know, if you're not careful, you might have given access to a folder that contains a subfolder that has really sensitive information in it and could get you in a lot of trouble. So, and it just spirals out of control.
It does, but you know the problem with this is though, it's because we are the first generation, Paul, really, to do all this kind of technology stuff. You know, and lots of our kind of sharing models, they come from like 1970s, really. They come from they come from what was called FAT file systems, file access table stuff. Remember that? And so, you know, what we're saying is if the folders at the top, then everything's inherited beneath it unless you break that. And of course, like, you know, SharePoint, which I absolutely dearly love and cherish, but that still works, you know, largely within those kind of mechanisms. And then, of course, so does Teams, which uses SharePoint for all of its storage. So does OneDrive, which is effectively SharePoint. And so that's and that like, you know, that brings, you know, me onto my other thing is, you know, there's a lack of automation within a lot of these systems, you know, in terms of things spiraling out of control. You can't just go into your OneDrive, for example, and say, well, you know, Paul Bedford or Stephen Atkins, you know, they're now, I'm not sharing that with them. How would I just put a complete block on the lot? On the lot. I mean, you can go through one by one. And if you were clever enough, which I'm not, of course, Paul, but if you were clever enough to think about this at the start and put it into a folder and then take them off at the folder level, again, back to those 1970s permissions, then you could do it. But a lot of this kind of requires a lot of forethought, which many of us, you know, so it's
easy for you to say, Paul.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And then linked into this, it's training, you know, it's like awareness. How do you how do you change people's awareness on this kind of stuff, you know?
You know, Paul, I don't think I've ever been trained on, you know, how to give permissions and the best practices and stuff in any company I've ever been in.
That's right. The thing is, what we tend to do is tend to get into a company. There's a SharePoint site there already. We get access to the SharePoint site, but we never really get told. And there's no visual on those sites or on those Teams or on those OneDrives to indicate, well, this is appropriate and this isn't appropriate. So, and again, you know, nice segue into, like, you know, the auditing bit again. Talking about the auditing element again, you know. For me, you know, if it's my site, well, how do I get an audit and a report, you know, to track the information that, you know, that I'm responsible for? It's really difficult.
Yeah, and obviously we want to make it clear we do trust our users.
But
only so far. Only so far.
we do. But the thing is, you know, where we're kind of like leading to here is it's about, you know, IT has historically been the gatekeeper for this, and so that takes us nicely onto our third point,
number 3.
Well, no, absolutely. So why aren't the IT teams today, you know, using the manual controls and you know, ultimately the technologies that they as a company have kind of invested into to manage this, you know, data spiraling and, you know, the collaboration piece.
Absolutely. I'll kick off with this one, I think. You know, first of all,
Paul, before you do kick off on this one,
go for it, Paul.
This is just to say, like, you know, people who are watching, this is only our opinion, right? Feel free to disagree. And I guess, you know, there's elements of controversy here. In fact, Paul, can I just start by saying something which is controversial?
Oof. Okay. I'm ready for this.
I don't think this is a problem, you know, that can be solved by IT. So anyway, there we go. I just thought I'd say that. I know.
Right. Brilliant stuff. So, I mean, also, we're going to put a disclaimer. Any statistics we quote on this have been made up. No, they haven't really. I'm just kidding. So, yeah, it's obviously the modern workplace. It's really complicated. You know, you got thousands of stakeholders, you got hundreds and hundreds of systems, you got processes where people come in and out of all those stakeholders and systems. And IT are tasked with managing the access to the sensitive information across like loads of platforms and devices. and a lot of it's quite manual. And to be honest, I think it's impossible for them to do a really good job of this. It's very difficult because of the volume of information. Paul, we were talking the other day, weren't we, about petabytes of data.
That's right.
So, I mean,
And
the
I said,
amount of information
I
has
said to you,
skyrocketed.
didn't I, that
You
a
did.
petabyte is 240,000 DVDs. Just to
Which
give
I
you,
didn't know what a DVD was, but you know, I can
They're
take
too-
your
you're
word
too
for
young.
that, Paul. I'm too young, as you can tell
And
by
there's
you know
another-
my grey hair.
And then there's another internet stat as well, which is Googleable. So you've got, but about volume, the volume of files that that we're putting into the cloud today,
Yeah.
the things that we're storing. There's a stat that says that every 2 days, we as as humanity create as much data that existed up to 2003, which is just incredible, right?
It is,
That we're doing that
yeah.
volume every 2 days, and so no wonder IT teams feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, and just to throw in another one there, so a petabyte is 1,024 terabytes, but that's a 1 with 15 zeros after it, which is big. Right. So anyway, so volume, it's skyrocketed, and so and then you look at how quickly we want this information shared. We're used to everything just being at our fingertips and being shareable and being collaborative very fast.
And we have that problem, don't we, in organisations and businesses all the time, whereby you start somewhere and you don't have access, or and then often the access is manually configured, and that's just not convenient. And
it's not fast enough.
It isn't fast. So what happens is invariably the owner just adds you in again, issues. And that brings me nicely then to the next one, which is of course human error. How many times, I'll put my hand up here, put both hands up, in fact, how many times have we sent emails to the wrong person? I mean, you and I are both called Paul, and it would be very easy to start typing in Paul, and I send you an email.
We even look quite similar, don't we?
We do, and sound similar. We could be the same person. And it's so easy, especially in a SharePoint Teams environment where you are adding people, and you just add the wrong person. How can you do that? How can you minimize those errors? How can you kind of mitigate this stuff? And then, of course, from an IT team's point of view, it's cost. It's as you were saying, it's time consuming, it's resource intensive. Managing all these permissions and the access to information, it's really hard.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
It is. And then of course understanding, right? Last point. And it's again a time from, I should have a controversial hat to wear when I say this, that IT right does not understand the information. Okay. And
Very true.
IT
but that
tools,
is controversial.
It is controversial. IT tools, right? And I'm 52 now, and I've been working in IT for years and years and years, right? In my opinion, with my experience, I've never known an IT tool yet to solve this problem at all, right? You've got access always degrades over time, regardless of what IT tool has been bought in the past. Always, Always. And if anybody disagrees with me, just say, actually, you message me on LinkedIn after this as well and disagree with me. We'll have a nice chat about it. So yeah, I think understanding is absolutely key and fundamental to this, which brings us to the next point 4.
Well, just on that, we've had a question from the audience.
Oh, cool.
What's the role of the IT in this? How do you start to make the shift?
Okay, so the role of IT in this is, they are the experts. They are the experts in the tech. This is my take on it, Paul. They are the experts in the technology, and so they are there from a guidance point of view. They are there
enabling.
They are enabling. They are empowerers. They are gonna provide the the business owners and the people who consume the data with the relevant and the right kinds of solutions and the right kinds of access to make this super simple. And we have our last point. Whoever asked that question, our last point, actually, we do cover that.
Cover this topic,
but I don't want to give too much away. If I did,
don't spoil the ending, Paul. Don't spoil the ending.
Okay, but so with that in mind, then you're saying that the data owner is the only person, therefore, that understands and that should control their data?
Yes.
I'll let you kick off with this one, Paul.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so what we're saying is, you're saying ownership. Very simply, right? The business user, the business owner, the person who's responsible for the information, understands its use, knows how accurate it is.
And use it every day.
That's right, yes. And so by giving the business, owner, the business user, control over their information, this ensures that this information is managed appropriately, and it's aligned to the needs and objectives of the business.
And I think, Paul, they're far less likely to make a serious error because they know the information. They know the information, they know the risks as well, don't they?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. And expertise. Exactly. You're saying that's it. Talk to they do. You're right. They work with it every day. It's they understand the context. So yeah, and then the thing I'm really big on, being a technology whisperer, is
Technology whisperer.
Technology whisperer is
I like
empowerment.
that.
It's nice,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah, we're going to empower people, and the thing is, we know from like all different walks of life that the moment that you give people responsibility, then they own it more. They're taking an active role. People are more engaged, people are more productive. And also just culture. I love culture. Love culture, Paul. And
I like it in yogurt as well.
It is. It's very good, and it just helps so much. Empowerment.
Does. Yeah. So I think as well, you know what? If you empower the business and you give them the rights to do what they need to do with their data, then it actually speeds things up. I don't know if you've ever. It helps customer satisfaction. I find it infuriating when I'm trying to get in touch with a company and they don't have all the data that they need because it's been protected by security. Do you know what I mean? So obviously, speed. They can share information and collaborate really quickly, but obviously conscious of risk. And so, because security has to come into this, doesn't it? So everywhere. I found that if you're in an HR department, you pretty much know what kind of what data is going to be risky and sensitive, and what's not. Yeah. Whereas an IT person probably would have less of an idea, I would imagine, because the business owners know.
Don't just imagine it.
Oh, okay.
They have got less of an idea. So it makes sense, doesn't it, that you would put somebody who actually understands the HR information and thus reduce the risk of incidents.
They understand the consequences of that stuff getting out, and I think they're going to be more careful with it because it's pretty much their jobs on the line, isn't it, Paul?
It is. Yeah, and then that brings us nicely to our final point. Steve,
of course. Yeah. So without being an inhibitor, then, so how can the responsibility for the secure, the day-to-day sharing of files be placed with that business user, bearing in mind that it's always typically been an IT-centric area?
It is, and the subtext to this is you need a solution, right? Because
absolutely,
because the current tools that we have at our disposal, they don't lend themselves, and I know I shouldn't say it so much, but they don't lend themselves to the two big things here, which is like IT not understanding things and also a culture shift so people can take responsibility. And so the first thing that a solution, any kind of solution that tackles this problem is going to need is automation. It's going to need a way of automating file sharing control. So you need the thing is need to recognize that people are busy, so we need to make it easier for business owners, business users to be able to do all this stuff, but without adding any further complexity to it or making it a burden for people. To be able to kind of share files easily, but ensure that permissions are correct, to be able to manage the access, to be able to categorize information, to say something sensitive, so that things are protected and not breached. And the empowerment of people. Sorry, go on. No, come on, Paul.
I was just going to say that security, has a habit of slowing things down.
It does.
And becoming a burden, and a tool should not do that. Sorry, go ahead, Paul.
No, that's right. And if the solution's correct, it's going to empower people rather than rather than putting a burden on them. And if, as long as it's easy enough, right, then the whole training element of this as well, if it's in plain English rather than the kind of varied IT speak, which is kind of hard to comprehend sometimes. then it's so much easier then for people to see at a glance, oh, this information's this, and it's shared with these people, and more importantly, Paul, and the reason why it's shared with those people is because they satisfied this criteria. It's all that kind of stuff. The reason why, the why,
it reduces the risk of of incidents and breaches, doesn't it? Absolutely.
It
yeah.
does.
So yeah, training's really important. And obviously, if you provide the business with the tools that they need to manage the access to their information, then they can make sure that the sensitive information that you want protecting is protected and is managed in a way that reduces the risk of security incidents. But also, one of the things that really important about a tool is visibility. Often it's so difficult to see who's got access to the information. We come back to our first question. Without that visibility, and a tool should provide that, in my opinion. And also, as I said before, we trust people, but not that much. People make mistakes, don't they? They don't do well. The mass majority don't do things on purpose. Let's face the facts here. But there is a small segment that we need to watch, and a tool should be able to monitor and audit that sensitive information is being protected, and that that it is being watched. And if we do have an incident, being able to track to how that happened and who unfortunately made it happen helps us sort that out real quick and respond quicker than it would be if we were just running around not knowing without any visibility.
Correct. And the good thing, back to the empowerment thing as well, to be able to monitor it and prove your compliance by yourself as an owner of that data, as a team owner or as a team member, or somebody who's got responsibility for part of it. That is so important.
Yeah, I mean, some sort of central dashboard where you could actually prove compliance to certain regulations would be fantastic.
Be awesome,
and very helpful. Yeah, absolutely. Because I know for a fact that it's seeing the kind of audits that companies go through, it's a lot of times very difficult to prove that you've got certain controls in place and that they're being adhered to. So yeah, that would be good.
Thank you, Paul.
Interesting. We've got up. So just kind of wrapping that up then with a couple of questions from the audience, if I can pass these across to both of you, Pauls. So one of the ones here was, do you have to convince data owners to take care about their access rights of their data, and why or why not?
I'll take that.
Go for it. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So in my experience as somebody who's done a lot of like user adoption in the past, as long as you're talking to people, then actually, Steve, to be honest with you, there's an appetite for this already. I've worked in so many organizations where people have actually owned a SharePoint site or a Microsoft team, and they've always said, well, who has got access to this? How do I know who is actually using it? There's a real appetite for this. So from my viewpoint, it doesn't really require an awful lot. It just requires people to be shown where this information exists and to be given the right tools to be able to do this themselves. Because the thing is, what they don't like currently with a lot of these tools is the uncertainty.
I think you're right there, Paul. I think education as well. Educating them on how to do it, so they feel comfortable. They don't just think that you're just going, oh yeah, this is your data now, you look after it. And they go, because that can be a little bit scary to
that's right. Or the people still need to be supported and to know that there's that IT there is to support and to guide and to to encourage all those things. Yeah.
And going back to your culture thing, what I've seen in companies, if you have like a security first culture where data is looked after and it's regularly brought up in meetings, on your intranet, and it's pushed as security as a culture and privacy as a culture, that makes life a lot easier. And it's got to come from the top down, really, hasn't it?
It has.
So, last one I've got here. It's not really a question; it's more of a statement. But again, I welcome your kind of concise views on this. But so, individual here. So we tend to limit our sharing within Microsoft 365 to stay compliant. It would be really nice not to have to do this.
Well, not to be compliant.
No, I think to limit the share to limit the sharing aspect.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So
yeah, it's So are we, sorry, can you repeat that? Are we saying that we're gonna, we
So
like
yeah,
not
so
to
you,
have to limit the sharing?
so
Yeah.
what we see a lot is within Microsoft 365 is people to kind of, you know, reduce the risk and to mitigate the dangers of information getting out of the business. They go into 365 Admin Center and they just move those sliders all the way down, and they say, right, nobody can share externally. However, like, you know, by doing that, you know, you're limiting creativity, you're stifling collaboration, you know, all those, you know, all those things, you know, ideas from outside, you know, working with collaborators outside of that business. And so, yes, again, you know, one of the things that an ideal solution would be able to do would be just to, you know, you would know instantly who's got access to what, and to give IT and give the business confidence that this information is secured and it, you know, it is compliant. It's again, we're back to visibility. It's that visibility angle.
And also, if you know, again, back to the culture side of things, if you promoted a security first culture and you educate people about what is private, what is PII, private, personally identifiable information, what is sensitive information, then you can start to reduce those levels of control and see what happens and monitor it, can't you? Because you could up it gradually. You don't have to suddenly give everybody control to everything, but you could change it from the lowest level up a couple of notches and just keep an eye on things, and you know, and keep people educated.
I think that's right. The thing that I think often businesses miss is, you know, when they are educating people or when they're telling people to do this through their e-learning mechanisms, they don't really give them the why. They don't really show them that, you know, that the you know, why this is really important and why they should be doing it, why it's important for them, because we're all people and we all have protected characteristics. Or, you know, we all have credit cards and we all have medical information, you know, so this is, you know, this is the thing. It's all about kind of, you know, empowerment and taking our place within this digital society.
Yeah, and I found as well that some companies do it a bit wrong. They inspire fear as a way of getting people to be secure, when really we don't want to inspire fear in people and have them worried that they're going to, if they, you know, we want to be able to, as you say, empower them, but with knowledge so that they understand what they're doing. And so that they can, obviously they need to be aware that there are consequences of breaches, but really we should be looking at collaboration as the main focus and being able to be productive and in a secure way. Make sense?
Agreed.
Interesting, gentlemen. That was, you know, that was very, very informative. Thank you very much. So I think, you know, in essence, without you know, overtly talking about, you know, who Torsion is, but with everything that both Pauls have discussed today here, you know, utilizing to complement your Microsoft stack, you know, the Torsion product, you can automate that file sharing controls back to the business user, empowering them. Alongside providing, you know, the training, which, you know, will give all the monitoring and auditing of the business user and their activities, so that in effect giving a secure and efficient environment for, you know, for data access governance, but allowing you as an organization to seamlessly collaborate without limits. So it's not about locking down today, it's about securely, you know, giving secure access and provision so we can freely collaborate in, you know, in the business world. So from that side of it, this pretty much just wraps up this this Q&A today. So from a next steps point of view, this this session has been recorded. We will be making this available to you probably tomorrow via a link being sent out from our marketing team. Obviously, if you do have any questions or queries regarding some of the content today, you know, please feel free to drop me a message. My details can be found here. So it's stephen.atkins@torsionis.com. The presentation slides will also be made available to you, which will include both of the Paul's contact details as well, both email addresses and LinkedIn profiles. So with that in mind, I'd like to thank you all for taking 36 minutes out of your day today, and thank you for joining us for this Torsion Q&A webinar. Thank you.
Thanks Stephen. Thanks, Paul. Great to chat. Appreciate the invite. Catch you later, folks.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye bye.
Goodbye.